Welcome, dreamers, to the realm where time whispers its forgotten lullabies. Tonight, beneath the gentle gaze of the moon and the silent breath of desert winds, we journey into a tale cloaked in gold and silence. This is the story of a queen whose beauty became eternal, yet whose fate remains hidden in the folds of history's shroud. We do not seek answers tonight, only mysteries. We do not chase truth, but let it drift like sand through our fingers. Before we embark on this journey through time's mysteries, if these ancient whispers resonate with your soul, let your presence be known through a gentle light, and join our circle of dreamers by subscribing, so that together we may continue these nightly wanderings through the forgotten corridors of time. Share with us, fellow dreamers, from which corner of the world you're joining tonight's contemplation. Let the global constellation of sleepers glow quietly as we drift together into the enigma of Queen Nefertiti, the vanished beauty of ancient Egypt. Close your eyes, let the Nile cradle your thoughts, and let us begin. Beneath the velvet shroud of night, where stars blink like ancient eyes, and the wind carries the hush of millennia, the desert begins to sigh. Its breath moves over dunes like unseen fingers, lifting grains of time-worn sand into silent spirals. This is not merely a place of dust and sun, but a vast, dreaming body cradling secrets too old for even memory to hold. Tonight, it murmurs the name of a Queen Nefertiti. Her name does not echo through crumbling ruins like that of Ramses or Tut. It is gentler, hidden between shadows, tucked beneath layers of sand, stone, and silence. A name once carried by golden tongues in perfume-laced chambers, now fading on broken, steely kissed by the desert wind. You are standing now on the threshold of that silence. Feel the warmth of the sand beneath your feet, not harsh, but comforting, like ancient skin that has known the sun far longer than we can grasp. Above you, the sky stretches endlessly, the same sky she once looked upon with eyes filled with power and vision. Listen, now can you hear it? Not the rustling of date palms or the stirring of ibis wings, but something deeper, more sacred. The sigh of the desert is not emptiness, it is fullness, too full to speak. It hums of forgotten things, of white limestone temples aligned with the sun's rebirth, of laughter and sandals in palace courtyards, of gold flickering on skin in the dusk of a month. Somewhere beneath your very feet lies the city once called Akhenaten, a horizon of the Aten. A city where Nefertiti once ruled, not merely as queen, but as living embodiment of a divine union. Her steps crossed corridors carved with sunlight and stone. Her breath mingled with incense and prophecy. And yet, she vanished, not into legend, not into glory, but into silence. It is this silence, the desert sighs of now. It is not empty. It holds us still. In the dreams of wind-carved stone, in the hush that follows starlight, Nefertiti remains, not in tomb or temple, but in the breath between. You are not alone in listening. Scholars have leaned into this silence. Archaeologists have traced its outlines with fingers and dust brushes, pressing ears to the earth as though it might whisper. And yet, the mystery remains. She is the queen whose face we know, whose fate we do not. This paradox is what draws us closer, step by step, breath by breath. As the wind quiets and the stars deepen in their stillness, we journey forward not to solve the silence, but to dwell within it. Let the desert cradle your thoughts. Let the sighs guide you like an ancient lullaby. Let us walk slowly, reverently, into the horizon where mystery once wore a crown. There is something eternal in a name, especially when it is carved with purpose, when it is spoken with reverence, and when it is whispered through centuries by the wind. Nefertiti, Nefit. The beautiful one has come. The name was more than a title, it was a vision, a promise, a celestial echo set into stone. And yet, even the names of queens, once gilded and illuminated, can fade. Not from stone alone, but from memory. That is the great paradox of time. It preserves and it forgets in the same breath. Let us walk now through the vast halls of remembrance, lit not by torches, but by the soft, amber glow of stars reflected on ancient stone. These stars once hung above Egypt's palaces, glittering over the black ribbon of the Nile, the same stars Nefertiti would have seen from her balcony, veiled in linen, watching as priests bowed toward Deity. Her name was carved, not in anonymity, but with brilliance. On temple walls she stood beside Akhenaten, not behind him. Equal in stature, in grace, in divinity, in this strange chapter of Egyptian theology, where the sun alone was god and the court became a celestial theater, Nefertiti was no passive consort. She was queen, priestess, goddess incarnate. We see her name still even now in surviving fragments, on statues with broken limbs, in cartouches etched on crumbling tomb entrances, but more hauntingly, we see it scratched out, erased, deliberately undone. Why? What happens when a name once glorified becomes dangerous? When memory itself becomes a threat? Theories bloom like lilies in the Nile's quiet season. Some say she fell from grace. Others whisper she took a new name and ruled alone. And still others believe she vanished into death, quietly, elegantly, without monument or fanfare. But the stars remember. The stars do not forget the light she once radiated. Imagine her now, her silhouette standing at the edge of a moonlit terrace, her kohl-lined eyes gazing toward Sirius as it rose above the eastern horizon. She would have felt the wind press against her sleeves, carrying with it the smell of lotus and myrrh, the distant murmur of flutes from a banquet below, and perhaps she whispered her own name, not to preserve it, not to boast, but to feel it, once again, as her own. Nevero Aton, the beautiful one has come, carved into starlight, not in defiance of time, but as its quiet companion. Tonight, as we rest our thoughts against the cool stone of antiquity, we need not seek where she went, only that she once was, that she shimmered in both flesh and myth, and that her name, like a breath in the cosmos, still drifts. Sleep now beside her echo. Let her name settle softly on your spirit, as we continue into the temple of memory. In the heart of Egypt, where the river bends like a sleeping serpent and the cliffs rise like guardians of ancient memory, there once stood a city carved from vision, not merely from limestone or labor, but from belief. Akhenaten, the horizon of the Ot. A city unlike any other, born not of empire but of transformation, and in its golden corridors, Nefertiti walked, her presence not whispered but sung. Until, one day, the songs faded. Let us sit now among its buried stones, dreamer, not as explorers, but as listeners. Let the dust lie undisturbed beneath your feet. Close your eyes and hear what the wind remembers. The city rose swiftly, built with urgency. A new capital, a new faith, a new world order drawn directly beneath the sun's watchful eye. Akhenaten, the king who saw gods differently, carved a path no pharaoh before him dared. And at his side, the queen whose beauty echoed eternity. Nefertiti's image was everywhere on walls. She is seen smiting enemies, offering sacrifices, riding chariot sacks reserved for kings. She was more than consort. She was the mirror of divinity, the mortal reflection of the sun's perfection. And yet as you look now upon the crumbled foundations and windswept ruins, something curious lingers, and absent. There is no grand tomb for Nefertiti in no sealed chamber with golden masks and alabaster jars, no sacred shrine where her K might rest. Instead, there is silence, as if the very city held its breath and never exhaled. Archaeologists have combed these stones, tracing footprints in dust, brushing away centuries of sleep in hopes of finding her. But Amarna yields only hints, never answers. A fragment here, a painted shard there, enough to suggest presence, never enough to confirm fate. Perhaps that is the city's secret gift, not in what it reveals, but what it withholds. Listen again. The wind between pillars speaks in soft pulses, like breath through reeds. Some say it carries her voice, still lingering in the spaces where she once stood. Can you feel it? Not a chill, but a hush. The kind that wraps around you just before dawn. The kind that carries ancient perfume and flickers of laughter long gone. Amarna is not a ruin. It is a cradle of forgotten dreams. And Nefertiti, though unseen, is not absent. She is folded into the stones. She is the echo in each broken lintel, the shimmer in each surviving pigment, the invisible curve in each crumbled arch. She does not need a tomb to endure. She became the city itself. So as you drift deeper into sleep, let the stones speak. Let Amarna's whispers guide your breath, slow and steady, like the pulse of the Nile. Let the mystery soothe you, not to solve but to carry you gently further along this silent journey. In a modest workshop, far from the throne room and its grandeur, a man once shaped eternity with his hands. His name was Thutmose, a master sculptor of and it was in his studio, tucked among sun-baked walls and drifted sands, that the most haunting image of Nefertiti came to life. Close your eyes now and step into that quiet room. Let the clay scent linger in your breath. Let the warmth of the stone floor soak into your being. Hear the faint scrape of tools, the hollow hush of a world focused on a single act of reverence. Before you stands her likeness, not draped in gold or flattery, but captured mid the bust of crafted not for ceremony, but as a study, a vision of symmetry and softness, not made to be seen by the world. Yet now it is the image most associated with her name, and still her eyes are empty. The inlays never placed. One wonders, dreamer, whether it was left that way by chance or intention. Does the void where her eyes should be reflect the void of her fate, or was it a gesture, a quiet surrender to the unknown? Thutmose's hands carved her features with devotion, the curve of her cheek, the grace of her neck, the slight lift of lips as if holding a secret. This was no idol, no goddess in abstraction. This was a woman remembered in flesh and breath, even as she slipped into myth. And yet, she is silent. That silence has traveled through time like a shadow behind candlelight. It fills the museums where her bust now rests beneath glass, watched by millions, revered across oceans. But even then she does not speak. We stare at her, hoping for revelation, hoping the sculptor's intention will seep into our dreams and tell us who she truly was. But stone does not answer. It only reflects. Perhaps Thutmose, in shaping her, knew she could not be contained in stone alone. Perhaps he left our eyes blank so that we might imagine them ourselves, each generation seeing her anew through the veil of our own longing. She remains a mystery because the mystery is what endures. The room where she was sculpted has long crumbled, but the vision remains suspended in stillness, preserved not just by paint and limestone, but by wonder. As you rest now, picture Thutmose's hand smoothing her brow, pausing to step back in reverence. The desert sun slipping through a narrow window, casting a quiet glow over her crown. A moment frozen not in fear or ambition, but in awe. Let that wrap around your breath. Let it soften the edges of your thoughts. Let Nefertiti's eternal gaze and finished yet complete guide you deeper into this night of whispers. Imagine a palace bathed in gold, where columns bloom like lotus stems and walls breathe with painted light. A place where the morning sun does not merely rise but is worshipped, fed, and adored. Here, at the center of this radiant world, walked two figures, Akhenaten, the pharaoh who saw the sun as the only god, and Nefertiti, the queen who stood not beside but with him. They did not merely reign, they reshaped heaven and earth with belief. Let us enter this world slowly, as if stepping into a dream. The walls are cool to the touch, the air perfumed with incense of blue lotus and cedar. Slender musicians play harps and flutes in distant courtyards, while soft footsteps echo across alabaster floors. This was a world drenched in sunlight where, each morning the Aten rose and was greeted like a living being. Nefertiti, wrapped in flowing linen, would offer her hands, her breath, her being to the divine disk. She was not simply beautiful, she was the embodiment of beauty as divine harmony. To the people of Akhenaten, her face reflected balance, order, and the gentle strength of the sacred feminine. On temple walls, she appears often alongside her husband, equal in gesture and stature. She presents offerings, leads rituals, even smites enemies, a role traditionally reserved for kings. Her name is not an echo, but a proclamation. In this new theology, she was not merely a vessel, she was a light alongside the sun. The love between Akhenaten and Nefertiti, whether rooted in passion or politics, appears radiant in their portrayals. They are shown touching cheeks, cradling daughters, basking together in the rays of the Aten. Such depictions are rare in Egyptian art. Intimacy emotion these were not common. But in Amana, love became part of the divine order. And yet, like the shifting of light through temple arches, this union, too, would not last. Eventually her presence in records begins to fade. The images cease. Her name dims. Some whisper she died in silence. Others say she changed her name and ruled alone. Still others suggest she fell from favor, swept aside by unseen tides of palace politics. But here, in this moment, before the fall, she reigned. She ruled with the sun, she ruled with beauty. And through her, the people beheld something rare, an image of woman not as ornament or shadow, but as sovereign and soul. Tonight, as you drift through the echoing halls of this golden palace, let the memory of that union guide you. Let the warmth of their shared vision wash over you like sunlight across ancient stone. Not everything that vanishes is lost. Sometimes it simply changes form and waits to be dreamed of once more. There are cities that rise from conquests, others from trade, but Akhenaten, it rose from vision, a dream made tangible, drawn from the mind of a king who turned away from tradition and built his own sacred path. A city aligned not to dynasty or deity, but to the light. And within its radiant walls, Queen Nefertiti stood as flame beside fire. Let us return to that city now. Let the horizon unfold in golden breath before you. The gates open wide, not with fanfare, but with serenity. There are no towering obelisks of Ammon, no statues of hidden gods. Only the disk the Otanites raise, reaching out like fingers, touching all beneath with divine affection. The city is ordered with purpose. Long avenues stretch toward the sun, and buildings hum in sun-washed white. Palaces do not loom, they breathe. Temples do not intimidate, they open. And at the center of the royal palace, where Nefertiti and Akhenaten walked in robes of pure linen, shaded by palm fans, crowned in sacred symbols. Can you see them? Walking slowly beneath open colonnades, their feet dusted with ochre sand, their eyes reflecting light not just from the sky but from within. They ruled together in a city designed as a mirror for heaven. Akhenaten was more than architecture. It was theology in stone, a sanctuary where the sun was not only worshipped but felt, tasted, adored. Every ritual bathed in daylight, every chamber open to the Aten's embrace. But this dream, like all that, is too perfect, flickered. The old priesthood frowned. The cities of Thebes and Memphis turned cold. The gods of shadow of familiar names. The ancestral thrones they watched with quiet fury. And beyond the reach of Otan's light, the empire stirred, uncertain. Yet, for a moment, it existed. A city where a queen was divine, where sunlight kissed the edges of every thought, where stone and soul danced in delicate harmony. Today, only broken foundations remain, a few fragments of walls, a layout sketched in dust. But if you close your eyes, if you breathe in the silence deeply enough, the light returns, not in brightness, but in warmth. It was a vision too luminous, too precise. But the vision left an imprint, like the warmth of sunlight on closed eyelids. And through that light, Nefertiti still walks, not in ruin, but in radiance. So let your breath slow, your thoughts soften. Let the city made of light wrap gently around your dreaming self. You are safe within its golden hush. The queen stands not behind you, but beside. Together, you walk toward the horizon, toward the quiet where beauty once ruled beneath the sun. There are places in this world where time does not march forward. It pauses, it lingers like perfume in a silken room, or like sunlight caught forever on a painted wall. The royal palace of Akhenaten was one such place. Though its walls have fallen, though its cedar ceilings have long turned to dust, the stillness remains. A breath held across millennia, a memory too graceful to decay. Let us enter now, slowly, with reverence. The palace doors are open not from abandonment, but from design. This was a place where the gods could wander freely among mortals, a place where the wind carried prayers in golden threads, and every corridor hummed with offerings of the soul. Nefertiti would have moved through this space not as a shadow, but as its light, her steps soft upon polished stone, her voice a quiet ripple over pools of papyrus and lotus. Servants bowed low, but not in fear. Musicians followed her steps with lyres and red pipes, their melodies floating upward like offerings to the sky. Here, time was not a line, it was a circle. Each day rose with the Aten, and each evening folded into the arms of the stars. In the center of it all stood Nefertiti, crowned with a blue headdress like a rising flame, her silhouette painted against alabaster columns that still whisper of her grace. The walls were not bare. They sang in color. Murals of the royal family Nefertiti with her 6 daughters, laughing beneath the rays of the Aten, scenes of gentleness, of laughter, of kisses placed on tiny brows. Not the conquests of pharaohs, but the quiet joys of living. A revolutionary art for a revolutionary queen. You can still feel it now, can't you? A warmth in your chest, a slowing of your breath, the hush of presence, without need for sound. This was her sanctuary, a world woven from rhythm, ritual, and radiant.com. It was not merely the seat of power, it was the heart of a dream shaped not by conquest, but by harmony, not by fear, but by devotion. And when Nefertiti vanished, the palace did not mourn in weeping or fire. It simply paused, as if waiting for her return. Even now, among the broken stones and sun-bleached lintels, there is a sense that something is listening. A hush that is not silence, but memory, waiting, holding, honoring. You may never stand within those walls in waking life, but here, in this space between sleep and story, you are welcome. Rest, dreamer, in the palace where time stood still. Let its quiet surround you. Let the memory of beauty and light press gently against your skin like the hush of linen in a warm breeze. Time does not pass here. It waits, with her, as the sun descends beyond the distant hills, casting long fingers of amber light across the stone courtyards of Ak. The temple falls into shadow, not darkness, but a gentle, golden dusk. It is here, in this sacred half-light, that silhouettes begin to stir. The great temple of the Aten is not closed like the temples of Amun or Thoth. There are no shadowed sanctuaries guarded by secrets. Here, the sky is the ceiling, the altar is beneath the open air, and the sun itself glorious, blazing, alive as a deity. But now, as the day exhales its final breath, the rituals begin to soften, and Nefertiti enters, not as a distant sovereign, not as a goddess high above, but as a living presence. Her form moves through columns shaped like papyrus stalks, the stone still warm beneath her feet. Around her, priestesses in linen whisper invocations, their voices rising and falling like the Nile in its gentle season. The rays of the Aten fall across her face one last time, illuminating her features in a moment both sacred and ephemeral. For in this hour, the queen is not performing. She is communing. It is said that in Amana no walls stood between the mortal and the divine, that the rituals were not cloaked in mystery, but in clarity. The Aten's light did not hide. It revealed, and yet, as Nefertiti bows at the center of the courtyard, her arms lifted to the vanishing disk, the mystery deepens. What did she feel in that moment, kneeling beneath the sky, surrounded by song and stone? Was it certainty or surrender? For even as the temple glowed with devotion, change was already at the edges. Whispers from Thebes, discontent among nobles, fishes forming in what once seemed eternal. And perhaps she knew, perhaps that dusk was not just the end of a day but the foreshadow of an era's twilight. Still, in that moment, her silhouette was serene, her outline carved into memory not by sculptors, but by the soft brush of sun against stone, a shadow not cast in fear, but in faith. Her body still, but her presence immense. Even now, when one walks the ruins of the great temple of Aten, some say they feel it, that invisible imprint of grace, a hush that arrives not with fear, but with awe, as if she still stands there, each dusk, greeting the fading light with the same devotion that once lit a city. Let your thoughts now settle into that same stillness. Let your breath slow with the rhythm of that falling sun. Let her silhouette rest beside your dreams, for though the light may fade, beauty never does. It only changes form. And wait, quiet as dusk, in the sacred spaces of memory. There was once a song so radiant it was etched not into papyrus but into stone, a song not of conquest or war, but of light and bliss, flowing, divine, the great hymn to the atom. Its words danced across temple walls like sunlight across rippling water, a song that praised not many gods, but one, a hymn that echoed with awe for the visible, tangible, warming face of the sun. And in that song Nefertiti stood just behind its words, beneath its rays, beside the king who dared to sing it. Let us listen together, dream not for melody, but for meaning. The hymn begins with the rising of the sun, casting away darkness, bringing life to the land, causing plants to grow and babies to smile in their mother's arms. It describes how the Atan, like a divine painter, touches every nation, every creature, with warmth and sight. But though it was Akhenaten who wrote the hymn or ordered it sung across limestone surfaces, one wonders, did Nefertiti hum its verses beneath her breath as she bathed in the early light? Did she repeat its lines as she walked through gardens of blue lotus and papyrus, greeting the dawn in silence? Did she, in her own soul, believe in the purity of this singular radiance? The hymn was more than belief, it was a revolution. It shattered centuries of tradition. It silenced old prayers. It lifted the Atan above all others, and with it, those closest to the king, especially And yet, like all things born of light alone, it could not endure the shadows. The old gods waited patiently. The temples of Amun, neglected and emptied, bided their time. And after Akhenaten's death, perhaps even before whispers rose, the hymn once thundered from rooftops, was spoken more quietly, then in secret, and then not at all. Stone cannot forget, but people can. And so the hymn faded, but not completely. Fragments remain, just enough to feel the reverence, the trembling joy, the audacity of loving the sun so purely that one made it their only god. And in that fading light, Nefertiti remains, not as a line in a forgotten hymn, but as its quiet echo. She was not the voice of the song perhaps, but she was its harmony. As you breathe in now, let the words of that ancient praise pass through you not as doctrine, but as comfort. You rise, beautiful, in the horizon of the sky, O living Aten, beginning of life. Let those words drift with you, like sunlight behind closed eyes. Let them carry you not to certainty, but to peace. For even if the hymn fades, its warmth lingers, and Nefertiti, the queen of the radiant moment, is still there shimmering gently in the music of the silence. There comes a moment in every great story when presence becomes absence, when footsteps once sure and strong begin to blur, and then disappear. So was with One day, her name adorned walls. Her image graced every corner of She stood equal to the king, beloved of the Atan, radiant in every way. And then, the records fall silent. No announcement, no royal decree, just silence. It is as though she walked through a doorway of time and never returned. Let us follow those last footprints now, not to chase, but to understand. Let your steps be slow, dreamer. The ground is sacred, and the echoes delicate. The final years of Akhenaten's reign grow increasingly shadowed. The art changes. The faces become somber. The figures of daughters vanish from murals, and Nefertiti simply fades from sight. Some say she died quietly, buried beneath the sands of Akhenaten in a tomb never found. Others suggest she assumed a new name, perhaps even ruling as pharaoh under the title Nef. A few whisper she was pushed aside, politically eclipsed by priests, generals, or even her own daughters. And still, others believe something softer, that she stepped back of her own will, that she had fulfilled her role, shaped her era, and chose to vanish into reverent silence. There is no trace of a funeral, no confirmed tomb, no surviving inscription that tells of her final days. Instead, the trail ends in soft, unmarked dust. And yet this absence is not emptiness. It is a pause, filled with wonder. For in that vanishing, she became something more than queen. She became legend, a question, a breath held across the centuries. Imagine her, one last time, walking through the palace garden at twilight. The sound of water trickling in lotus pools, the fragrance of fig and myrrh on the evening breeze. Her blue crown held beneath her arm, her gaze lifted toward the reddening sky. She does not run, she does not fall, she simply fades into the folds of history. Not with sorrow, not with fear, but with grace, and perhaps that is why she still haunts us, not with specter or shadow, but with the yearning of a story unfinished. As you drift now into the deeper quiet of sleep, let her footprints guide you not toward answers, but toward stillness, vanished from the world, but not from the soul of time. She is there, always, on sacred ground, just ahead, just beyond the last breath of memory. In the silence of glass chambers and softly lit museums, one artifact draws countless eyes. It does not shimmer with jewels, it does not tower with intimidation. And yet, It holds the gaze longer than gold or Thrawn, the blue crown of not in substance, but in image. That iconic, flat-topped headdress, all regal, graceful as a swan's neck, has become the symbol of a queen who left no tomb, no body, and no farewell. It endures not in royal vaults, but in the dreams of those who remember her. Close your eyes, and you may see it now. A deep, dusky cobalt, delicate golden band circling the base. A uraeus serpent poised in silence at the brow, and beneath it a face sculpted not in arrogance, but in serenity. This crown did not weigh heavily, not in appearance. It was not a helm of war or intimidation. It was a Legain's balance, a symbol of her presence as both ruler and revelation. What did it mean to wear such a crown in a world of gods and men? Was it armor or invitation? She wore it not only in ceremony but in painted walls that depicted her attending daily life, present in family, faith, and governance. Always with that calm, that impossible poise. And still, the real crown is lost. No chamber has revealed it. No inscription confirms where it rests. The crown we know is one conjured in stone, frozen in sculpture, eternal in mystery. But perhaps that is how she wanted it, to leave behind not an object to be handled, but a symbol to be felt. In a world of shifting sands and crumbling dynasties, what remains is the image, a silhouette against the centuries, a crown that whispers not power, but stillness, not command, but clarity. She wore it with the certainty of one who understood that beauty, when rooted in spirit, does not need to shout. Let your thoughts rest now beneath that crown's invisible weight. Feel it above your own brow, not as burden, but as blessing. Let it center you. Let it remind you that presence need not be loud to be eternal. As the world shifts around you, the crown of Nefertiti remains untouched by time, an echo in indigo, a hush in gold, a memory worn only by dreams. Behind a veil of museum glass, under soft, reverent lighting, she watches, silent, motionless, unblinking, the Berlin bust of Nefertiti, a pause in time, a whisper from an age so distant, yet so intimately near in her gaze. Let us stand before her now not as tourists, not as scholars but as dreamers. Breathe softly. Feel the stillness. Notice how, even in a room filled with murmurs and footsteps, she commands silence without lifting a hand, without uttering a word. Her features are impossibly symmetrical. High cheekbones, slender nose, delicate jawline. The painted skin still glows with faint warmth, as if her breath might stir once more. But it is the eyes that hold us. One is complete, the other left bare. Much has been said of this missing, and some argue it was never finished. Others believe it was removed. But in that absence lies the heartbeat of mystery. Why is one eye whole and the other left hollow? Does it mirror her legacy, part remembered, part arrest? Does it speak of how we see her half illuminated, half imagined? The sculptor Thutmose may never have intended the bust for display. It may have been a model, a reference, a work in progress. Yet somehow, it survived while her temples crumbled, her tomb vanished, her name faded. And in this fragile survival, she remains more real than ruins. Viewers from around the world come to her, hoping to understand, hoping to feel her. And though she offers no answers, she does not turn away. Her gaze meets yours, quiet and unyielding. Some describe it as haughty, others serene. But perhaps what we see in her is what we carry within ourselves, a longing to be known, a fear of being forgotten, a hope that beauty can endure even when everything else is lost. In that bust, Nefertiti is both woman and myth. She is stillness and enigma, and her gaze does not look backward. It looks through. Tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, let hers remain open for you. Let her see into your own longing for connection, for clarity, for the comfort of ancient grace. She has waited millennia in silence. Let that silence keep you now, for even in stone, she watches with the eyes of time. The question floats like mist above a forgotten lake. Where did she go? No one saw her fall. No one recorded her end. There was no public mourning, no statues of grief, no final temple songs echoing across the Nile. One moment, she stood in sunlight. The next, she was gone. And the silence that followed was not ordinary silence. It was curated, deliberate, as if the wind itself had been instructed not to speak her name. Historians have offered answers, but answers, dreamer, are not the same as truth. One theory suggests she died perhaps during childbirth or by illness. Her body, they say, may rest still in the sands of Amarna, in a tomb not yet opened. A quiet ending to a luminous life. Others speak of transformation, that Nefertiti took a new name, Nefer and Dan ruled as pharaoh in her own right after Akhenaten's passing. They see traces in inscriptions, feminine endings on royal titles, decisions made from the throne in a voice not entirely masculine. And then there are those who claim she was removed perhaps by court intrigue, by shifting political tides, by those who feared the power she held. Erased, not by time, but by will. But none of these theories are complete. None of them sing with certainty. Instead, what remains is the space she left behind. A space not empty, but sacred. There is a kind of holiness in vanishing, to disappear without chaos, to be remembered not through death, but through questions, to become not a relic, but a riddle. Perhaps that was her final act of sovereignty, to write herself out of the story and into myth. As you lie now beneath the quiet of this night, let that mystery cradle your breath. Let the absence not trouble you, but soothe you. Some stories are not meant to be solved. They are meant to be felt, gently, like wind across a veil. And perhaps Nefertiti did not leave. Perhaps she only stepped beyond the edge of history's light, where she still waits, unseen, but not lost, silent, but not gone. Beneath the sands of Egypt lie chambers still sealed, corridors carved in the dark, untouched by breath or sunlight, where the air itself waits in reverence. Among them, perhaps, rests Nefertiti. But no tomb bears her name with certainty. No walls sing her titles. No golden cartouches proclaim her eternity. She is the queen without a grave. In the Valley of the Kings, tombs have been unearthed with fanfare. Tukuman's treasure-laden sanctuary. The great monuments of Ramses and Hatshepsut, stone mouths open to reveal riches, rituals, and the promises of afterlife. But for Nef, only silence. Some believe she lies hidden in a sealed chamber near her stepson, within the very walls of Tutankhamun's tomb. Radar scans, faint outlines, subtle anomalies these have stirred hope, then skepticism. Yet the door, if it exists, remains unopened. Others believe she was buried in Amarna near the city of the Otan's light, in a tomb now lost to time. That her sarcophagus, perhaps delicate and unadorned, was left behind when the capital was abandoned and memory moved elsewhere. But still others say her tomb was destroyed, not by time, but by intent, erased from the monuments, chiseled from stone, her names scratched away by those who reclaimed the old gods, who sought to dismantle Akhenaten's legacy and everything it touched. And yet despite the silence, despite the dust her spirit endures, there is something sacred about the tomb not found. It invites not conquest, but contemplation. It allows her to remain where time cannot follow, not sealed in gold, but in wonder. Nefertiti does not sleep in sarcophagus or shrine. She sleeps in questions. And you, dreamer, walk the edge of those questions now. Picture her tomb not in limestone, but in starlight, not guarded by jackals and spells, but by silence and breath. Imagine it beneath your feet and opened, unspoken. Wait not for discovery, but for remembrance. And as your breath deepens, as your thoughts soften, know this: there is beauty in what is hidden. There is peace in what we do not possess. And there is a sacred stillness in every tomb left untouched. Not all who vanish are lost. Some simply dream. And in that space between memory and myth, Nefertiti lingers not as a ghost, but as a dream wrapped in gold. Close your eyes now, dreamer. Let the hush of night settle around you like fine linen. You are no longer in your room, but floating gently through a chamber woven of silence and amber light. This is the place where Nefertiti sleeps, not beneath stone, nor within a sarcophagus carved by human hands, but within the dreaming breath of history. In this space, time curls like incense. The air is still, yet it hums softly with the remnants of her presence. She lies beneath a canopy of painted stars, their shimmer dimmed with time but still visible to those who look gently. Her hands are folded upon her chest, her face serene, as though listening to something deeper than sound. Around her, fragments of golden adornment rest not for wealth, but for remembrance. A pectoral shaped like the Aton rays reaching down to touch her heart. A ring carved with a cartouche, no longer legible. A headdress made of translucent alabaster, cool as moonlight. She does not stir, she does not age, she only dreams. And her dreams are not ordinary. She dreams of the Nile rising to meet the fields. She dreams of laughter in palace gardens, her daughters chasing sunbeams on limestone paths. She dreams a ritual offering flowers to the dawn, singing praises to the light, touching the face of Akhenaten with a gaze deeper than words. And she dreams of us, of those who remember, of those who whisper her name across the miles and centuries, of those who wonder where she went and why she never said goodbye. These dreams are not bound by tomb or time. They traveled like feathers on wind. They find their way into stories, into sculpture, into the quiet contemplation of those who pause to wonder at her. And now, they find their way to you. Tonight you share in her golden sleep, not as an intruder, but as a guest. Not to awaken her, but to rest beside her, wrapped in the same hush that holds the stars in place. Let your breath match the stillness of her chamber. Let your thoughts ripple like light upon ancient walls. And let her dreams become yours, flowing softly into the realm of sleep. She does not ask to be found, only to be remembered, gently, silently, in dreams. When the radiant city of Akhenaten fell into ruin and the light of the Aton dimmed, Egypt turned its gaze once more to the old gods. The temples of Ammon reopened, the priests returned, and a boy took the throne. He was just a child, perhaps 9 or 10, when he became pharaoh. Yet already, The weight of centuries pressed upon his narrow shoulders. The gods expected restoration. The court demanded tradition. And the people, weary from upheaval, longed for the familiar. But behind the throne, dreamer, there were whispers. Whispers of who guided his hand, who shaped his decree, who truly ruled from the shadows of the throne. Some say it was I, the vizier. Others point to Horemheb, the general. But there are those who turn their attention to a figure more mysterious. Could she have remained, not as queen consort, but as royal advisor, perhaps as Nefertiti pharaoh in her own right, or as a quiet regent, ensuring the child's reign unfolded in safety? There are tantalizing clues. Cartouches once bearing the name Nefertiti seem to be replaced with Tutankhamun's artifacts once meant for another ruler bear signs of reuse. Even tomb goods appear reshaped from earlier ownership. Was she guiding the boy king's steps even as her own name was being brushed away? Imagine now a quiet chamber in the palace. The boy pharaoh sits on a golden stool, legs dangling, uncertain. Beside him, a woman of luminous calm speaks softly, guiding his hand across a scroll, her voice steady as the Nile. She does not raise her voice, she does not take credit, she only watches and shapes. The art of influence is not always loud. Sometimes it moves like a shadow, gentle, steady, unseen. As the reign of Tutankhamun slowly re-established the old ways, what became of her? Did she fade willingly? Did she resist? Or did she simply vanish? Content that her light had set Egypt on a quiet course once more. We do not know, but the whispers remain, and the shadows they cast are long. Tonight, let those shadows comfort you. Let the soft possibility of her presence behind the throne soothe the mind, like the cool air behind a veil. Let her strength be felt not in titles, but in stillness, not in legacy, but in care. For even in silence, she may have shaped a king, and through that, shaped eternity. She was once the beating heart of a city, the breath between the sun's first light and its fading dusk. She was queen, priestess, symbol, but perhaps she was something even deeper. Perhaps she was a mother. The records, dreamer, are faint, dusty fragments, half-erased titles, blurred names on scattered stele. And yet from these whispers, the image begins to take shape: a woman who bore daughters, who cradled them in temples flooded with sunlight, who taught them not only beauty but power. 6 daughters are attributed to Nef, each one once captured in limestone reliefs, laughing, reaching, seated beside her in courtly scenes. A rare glimpse of affection carved in stone, softer, more human than the usual stoic poses of Egyptian royalty. We see them in early years, Meritaten and Mik, dancing in the rays of the Aton, playing with necklaces, embracing their parents, tender, fleeting, real. But then, the images change. One daughter vanishes entirely. Another appears in scenes of mourning, perhaps at her own death. The playful murals become more solemn. The laughter ceases. Did Nefertiti grieve as a mother? Did she, once wrapped in divine imagery, kneel alone in her chamber, her daughter's voices echoes in an empty corridor? We may never know. But she was not untouched by sorrow, and perhaps it was sorrow that began her fading, not from life, but from the eye of the world. Not by force, but by choice. A woman who had lived as a goddess became a ghost, not the kind that haunts, the kind that lingers, the kind whose absence is louder than presence. And as the centuries turned, that ghost became legend, not in the fearful sense, but in the sacred. A name whispered on desert wind, a face carried through ink and imagination, a mystery that refuses to settle into certainty. She is mother, she is spirit, she is the quiet pulse in every unanswered question. Let her surround you now, not as queen or myth, but as a breath in the dark, a gentle, knowing presence beside your dreams, the warmth of a hand once held, the hush of a lullaby never written. You do not need to solve her, only to feel her, for some ghosts are not here to haunt us. They are here to remind us that love, grace, and presence can endure even when the world forgets. In the halls of time, even the tallest columns fall, even the grandest names can fracture, leaving only fragments behind, discovered, half-whispered. So it is with her story is scattered, dreamer, like pillars that once held up golden ceilings, now cracked and lying sideways in the sand. Some pieces stand proudly under the sky, bearing her image in full. Others lie hidden, their inscriptions eroded, their shapes barely recognizable. Yet even in ruin they speak. Walk with me now through these fallen corridors. Let the sun warm your shoulders as it once warmed hers. Listen to the faint hum of bees in the papyrus reeds, and see the remnants of her name chiseled into stone, then carved away by hands that feared remembrance. Why would anyone fear a memory? Because Nefertiti's power was not only in life, but in legacy. Her name was linked to a time of radical change, a time when the old gods were silenced, when a queen stood beside a pharaoh not as ornament but as equal. And when that age ended, it was not merely buried, it was dismantled. The pillars of her memory were broken not by time, but by decree. Her images were defaced, her cartouches struck from record, her statues toppled, hidden not in hatred, but in fear. To speak her name became a quiet act of rebellion. To remember her, a quiet defiance. And yet, the memory persisted, in pieces of limestone sold in Cairo markets, in fragments of murals discovered in Rubel, in the gaze of a single surviving bust, hidden away in a sculptor's workshop, in the rising interest of dreamers like you, tracing her name across centuries, hoping to catch a whisper of who she was. Even broken pillars cast long shadows. Each fragment tells a story not only of what was, but of what someone tried to erase. But memory, when carried gently, cannot be destroyed. Tonight, as you lie still beneath your own ceiling, imagine hers the roof of a temple open to the stars, columns tall and graceful like reeds in a sacred pond. Now broken, but never lost, for Nefertiti's memory is not one pillar. It is many, scattered, yes, but enduring. And in the quiet act of remembering her softly without demand, you help rebuild them, not in stone, but in spirit. Let your breath be steady, your thoughts on her. The queen walks among these ruins still, not mourning their fall, but watching how gently we step around them. The city was once radiant, Akhenaten, the house of the horizon, built in reverence, in vision, in defiance of tradition. But now the sand is swallowed. Let us walk its invisible streets once more, not in search of monuments, but in search of memory. The wind carries grains that once rested on palace floors. Beneath your feet lie foundations that knew the footfall of queens and priests, children and scribes. But above, there is only silence. Time has no enemies, dreamer. It does not rage. It only reclaims. And the city of light, born in devotion to the Aton, was never meant to last. It rose quickly, gloriously, and it fell just as swiftly, forgotten by its own people, erased by successors who feared its truth. The temples were abandoned, the gardens withered, statues toppled, and over all of it, the desert came, first in whispers, then in waves. Sand draped the city like a burial shroud. Pillars disappeared, paint faded. Only the bones of the dream remained, hidden beneath the dust. Yet beneath that burial, the city breathed. It waited, not for resurrection but for recognition. And it was Nefertiti who lingered most in this hush. She had once walked these avenues as both queen and priestess. Her breath had stirred curtains in windowed halls. Her laughter, once carried on afternoon breezes, was now replaced by the hush of shifting dunes. The sand does not discriminate. It covers the sacred and the mundane. It smooths the edges of legacy, but it cannot erase it, because within the sand there is remembrance. Every buried wall still bears her touch. Every hidden chamber, a trace of her incense. Every dust-coated carven, a whisper of her presence. To this day, archaeologists uncover fragments from Akhenaten. The city returns in pieces, like a dream recalled in the early morning hours, soft around the edges, but certain in feeling. And so, too, does she return. Not in full, but in essence. Let your mind drift now to that buried city. Picture it not as ruin, but as slumbering. Let the sand move softly around you, not as loss, but as protection guarding something too beautiful for hurried hands. The house of the horizon was swallowed, not to be lost, but to be preserved in silence, waiting for dreamers to remember. And you, tonight, are one such dreamer. Rest in the memory of what lies beneath. Trust the silence, honor the buried beauty, and let her name, like the city she loved, rise gently in your breath. There are eyes that observe, eyes that reflect, and then there are eyes that see eternity. Nefertiti's were such eyes. Though we have never seen them in life, only in sculpture, only in stone, they linger in our imagination. Not because of their shape or color, but because of what they suggest: vision, composure, depth. Close your own eyes for a moment, dreamer. Imagine what hers once beheld. A palace courtyard at dawn, the stones still cool from the night, the disk of the Otan rising slowly over the eastern cliffs, rays unfolding like fingers across the desert. A daughter smiling in the morning light, chasing the flickering shadow of a palm. Akhenaten's silhouette beside her, arms lifted in prayer, his voice soft as the wind. She saw not only beauty, but change. Not only rituals, but revolutions. She lived in a time of transformation, one that unseated centuries of tradition in favor of a single blinding truth, and she stood at the center of it. To see eternity is not only to witness the divine, but to recognize the fragility of the present. Perhaps she saw us to the shadows forming at the edges, the murmurs of dissent, the cracks in the vision, the silent withdrawal of loyalty from nobles, priests, the people. And yet, she did not waver. For the gaze of Nefertiti in every surviving image remains unwavering. She looks forward not with defiance, but with stillness, as though she sees beyond our time, beyond her own, as though she gazes into a space untouched by decay, unmarked by ruin, a space where truth is not argued, but felt. Perhaps it is this gaze that keeps us returning, because when we look into her sculpted eyes, even the one left empty, we are reminded of something timeless, something unspoken, a kind of knowing, a kind of peace. And tonight, as your breathing slows, let her eyes remain with you. not to judge, not to haunt, but to hold, to remind you that some things need not be solved to be understood, that some beauty does not fade, because it lives in the spaces between you must sleep now. Under the stars she once knew, you may rest, knowing that her gaze still holds, still sees, still waits for you, for the world, for the quiet return of eternity. The sun had not yet set on Amarna, but its rays grew softer, and in that twilight, when power shifted and old gods stirred again, a quiet question bloomed: was Nefertiti pharaoh? Not in name alone, not in ceremony, but in full sovereignty, bearing the crook and flail, seated on the throne of the two lands, ruling not beside a king, but as one. Let us sit in that question now, dreamer. Let it unfold slowly, like the shadows across a sandstone wall. After Akhenaten's final appearances, the records become fractured. His daughters take prominence in inscriptions. The divine family portrait begins to fray, and a new name risen. Some believe this was Nefertiti, adopting a pharaoh's title, stepping into the throne's silence to guide a nation drifting. Others think it may have been one of her daughters. Still others argue for a co-regency during Akhenaten's final, fading years. But one thing is certain: there was a ruler, briefly, whose identity remained shrouded. A pharaoh with a feminine voice, a sovereign whose name appeared on offerings and decree, and then disappeared. If it was Nefertiti, she ruled not from glory but from the edge. The old gods were returning. The priests of Amun regathered their strength. The court grew restless. The provinces uncertain. The dream of the Atan dimmed into embers. And yet, if she held the crown, she did so with grace. No war, no tyranny, only the quiet holding of a fragile kingdom, a hand steady in the dusk. Picture her now, seated alone in the palace hall, the golden sun barely illuminating the far walls. Scrolls before her, courtiers silent, a young Tutankhaten playing in the distance, and in her expression, not fear, but resolve. To lead in twilight is a sacred burden. It is to light the final lamps of a fading era, to carry the dream gently to its rest, to know the moment is passing, and still remain faithful to its beauty. If she was pharaoh, she did not seek eternal monuments, she sought peace, and perhaps that is why her name was later erased. A ruler too elegant, too fleeting, too powerful in silence. Tonight let that silence hold you. Let the possibility of her final sovereignty cradle your thoughts, not in the grandeur of power, but in the wisdom of acceptance. To rule at the end of a world, and to do so with dignity, is perhaps the truest crown of all. There was a time when her footsteps echoed in Akhenaten's open halls, where sunlight and prayer met in harmony. But long before that city, and long after it faded, there was another place, the old heart of Egypt, Karnak, once the greatest temple complex in the ancient world. It sprawled like a sacred labyrinth beneath the sky, walls rising with purpose, shadows curling in corners like forgotten chants. It was here that the old gods reigned among Mut and Suand, where generations of pharaohs etched their names into eternity. And here, in the long corridor between pillars thick as trees, there is silence. Not absence, not disuse, a chosen, sculpted silence. Nefertiti's name, once carved in reverence in other places, is not found here. No statues, no hymns chiseled into these stones for her. The rulers that came after ensured it. Her memory, it seems, was not simply lost, it was silenced. The priests of Amun had returned with quiet fury. They reopened their temples, reignited their rituals, and set about reclaiming their god's dominion. The heresy of the Otan was to be forgotten, its names purged from sacred records. Nefertiti, once queen of the light, became an echo not worthy of their inscription. And yet, she remains not in the stone, but in the stillness. For even now, Jima, when you walk through Karnak's great halls, past columns taller than palms, there are spaces where the air feels heavier, as if something is missing, as if the silence itself remembers her. She is the pause between hieroglyphs, the breath between chants, the hush that lingers where her name should have been. Not all memory needs to be written. Some persists in what is withheld, and perhaps that, too, was part of her design, to exist beyond inscription, to endure not in the carvings, but in the contemplations, to be felt, not declared. As you wander through this corridor in your mind, allow the silence to speak. Let it surround you, not as emptiness but as presence. Let the columns rise around your thoughts like guardians of forgotten truths. Let her unspoken name echo softly between them. Karnak may not remember her with words, but silence, as always, remembers everything. Some stories are written with ink, others with gold, but the most haunting stories, dreamer, are written with what is missing. Nefertiti's life is one such tale, a scroll with its middle torn away, a book whose final chapters were never inscribed, or perhaps were erased by trembling hands. She appears in vivid presence at Akhenaten's side, in rituals, in portraits, in poetry. For a while, the record glows with her. The queen who shaped a city, led a people, mirrored the divine, and then the ink runs dry. What follows is confusion, a tangle of names and titles. Nefertiti, who died, who ruled the twilight years of the earth. Scholars argue across centuries. The fragments are their offering tables, sealed jars, partial inscriptions, but they form no clear shape. Like stars scattered across a desert sky, they beckon interpretation, but not certainty. She is the queen of lost chapters, but perhaps it is not a tragedy. Perhaps those missing pages were never meant to be written. Perhaps her story was designed to invite dreaming, to stretch beyond facts into feeling, to allow each generation to imagine her in their own light, because the power of a lost chapter is not in what it hides, but in what it evokes. Nefertiti becomes more than a queen. She becomes a question. What does it mean to lead in light, to disappear with grace, to be remembered through silence rather than song? Her story invites us to look not at what is, but what was almost. Not at the monument, but the shadow behind it. Not at the throne, but the hush that followed. Tonight, let her unwritten pages rest in your hands, not to fill them, but to honor them. Let your imagination turn them, slowly, like papyrus rustling in a sacred breeze. She is not missing. She is merely between the lines. And in that quiet space, she breathes. History, like stone, can be painted over. A name can be gilded, then scraped away. A face can be adorned, then buried beneath new strokes. But what lies beneath often lingers. Nefertiti's legacy is not only buried in tombs or lost in scrolls. It hides beneath layers of paint, of politics, of purposeful forgetting. Let us return to the painted walls of Amarna now. Too, the murals faded with time, flaking with silence. Beneath these scenes, restorers have found traces of alternate names, alternate shapes, cartouches altered, royal titles changed, feminine forms reshaped into masculine ones. Hieroglyphs adjusted like fading dreams beneath a rising tide. Was it erasure or transformation? Did Nefertiti's image become that of Nef? Was her face molded into a king's, or was she simply brushed away, too powerful, too different, too radiant to be allowed to remain? Politics, after all, is not just law, it is story, and he who controls the story controls the past. The return of Amun's priesthood demanded a new chapter, one that silenced the Atan, and with it, those who bore its light. Akhenaten was branded a heretic. The city was abandoned, and Nefertiti, who had stood as mirror in flame beside the sun, was painted over, but not completely. Beneath each layer lies a memory, a whisper, a brushstroke of resistance. Modern technology has begun to peel back those veils. Ultraviolet light reveals names hidden beneath reveal. Infrared scans show earlier lines, feminine hands beneath masculine postures. A presence never truly erased. And isn't that the truth of all hidden things? They do not disappear. They only wait. Tonight, as your breath slows, picture a wall deep within an ancient chamber. The paint above is dull, but beneath the face glows faintly, not in gold, but in essence it is Nefertiti, still there, still watching, not erased, only resting beneath. Let your thoughts soften as these layers dissolve. Let the coverings fall gently away. And there, beneath the silence, find her once more. She does not need to be restored. She only needs to be remembered. Some figures of history walking, clarity outlined in facts, tethered by dates, sealed in tombs and triumphs. But Nefertiti does not walk. She drifts, not forward, not back, but beside. She is not bound by certainty. She is not held by finality. She is a sister not to evidence, but to mystery, to myth. Let us wander with her now, not in the stone corridors of palaces or the vast halls of tombs, but in the liminal spaces between history and legend, that glowing space where memory softens and the soul is allowed to float. She belongs here, in this in-between, alongside Atlantis, beside Avalon, among the vanished queens and priestesses of lost cities whose names are spoken only in dreams. When we say Nefertiti, we do not only mean the woman. We speak of elegance untouched by time, of devotion that did not require temples to endure, of presence so graceful it chose mystery over monument. Her face, rendered in limestone, is no longer just hers. It is a symbol, a sigh, a question asked by time, unanswered by history, and in this way she has become a myth, but not a fiction, a living myth. One that stirs something quiet and beautiful in those who remember. She is not like Cleopatra, wrapped in drama, nor like Hatshepsut, recorded in triumph. Nefertiti is the breath between pages, the gaze from behind veils, the name whispered into the night sky without expectation of reply. This is why she endures, not because of what we know, but because of what we feel. She belongs not only to Egypt, but to dreamers, to those who seek, not to solve, but to contemplate, to those who close their eyes and find her not in ruins, but in silence. So as you lie now in the hush between thought and sleep, let her drift beside you, not as a queen of kingdoms, but as a queen of wonder, a sister to mystery, a daughter of myth, and a mother of dreams. There is a sorrow in forgetting, a quiet ache when memory fades, not from lack of love, but from time's relentless tide. And yet, there is also something profound in the way a name can vanish and still remain. For a long time, Egypt forgot, Not in rumor, not in curse, but in omission. Her name did not survive the dynasties that followed. The priests of Ammon returned in force, and the worship of the Aton became taboo. Her image, once painted in gold and sunlight, was buried beneath dust and politics, and for thousands of years, the world moved on without her. Her city was lost. Her tomb was sealed or never finished. Her cartouches were erased from temples and stelae. The scribes of later dynasties recorded the names of kings and battles, gods and festivals. But not hers. No lists of queens include her. No chronicles describe her reign. She became, for all purposes, invisible. But forgetting is not always final. Because the land remembers, the wind over the cliffs of Amarna still sings her name. The Nile, in its deep bends, still reflects her sky. And the stone's patient guardians of time have held her essence quietly, waiting for rediscovery. And rediscovery came. In the 20th century, the bust surfaced from the sands. Fragments of sculpture, hints of her daughters, traces of her titles began to emerge. The silence began to crack. Historians looked again. Archaeologists returned to the desert. Dreamers leaned in, breath held, to listen. Nefertiti was remembered, not because a tomb was found, but because forgetting her became impossible. Some names rise through monuments, others through myth, and some like hers through the longing of a world that recognizes beauty, grace, and mystery even after centuries of sleep. You see, Egypt did not truly forget her. It simply held her in stillness, like a breath paused, like a jewel buried deep in sand, like a star hidden by daylight. And now, as you rest in this quiet hour, know that remembering is not only history's duty, it is yours. Each time you whisper her name, each time you wonder where she went, you bring her closer. You honor what once was nearly lost. Not with facts, but with feeling. Not with records, but with reverence. So whisper her name once more, softly into the night. Nefertiti not forgotten, only waiting. In a world where all things fade, where statues crumble, scrolls turn to dust, and names vanish like ink in water, one truth remains. Some beauty endures, not because it is preserved, but because it is remembered in silence. Nefertiti's beauty was once praised in song and stone. The beautiful one has come. They called her face captured not only in sculpture but in reverence. Symmetry so perfect, it transcended the flesh. Eyes like twilight, lips like a hush before dawn, presence like a sunbeam wandering through temple columns. But beauty, dreamer, is more than form, more than cheekbones and paint. It is resonance, and hers still resonates, because her beauty was not hers alone. It was the expression of an age, the reflection of a moment in time when art reached for something deeper, when elegance became theology, when the sacred feminine stood not behind but beside the divine. Even as her city fell, as her memory was scattered to wind and sand, the essence of her remained, like perfume long faded from a linen robe, like a breeze that still carries warmth from a vanished fire. You feel it now, don't you? It's not in the bust, not in the fresco, not even in the name. It is in the pause between your breaths, the hush you feel in her presence, the way her mystery calls not to your mind but to your soul. Time tried to erase her, but time failed. Because beauty like hers is not fragile. It is not vanity. It is not surface. It is deep. It is in the stillness of gaze, the quiet certainty of spirit, the strength that neither shouts nor demands but simply is. And tonight, as you drift toward sleep, feel that beauty resting around you. Let it move through your limbs like a tide. Let it settle over you like fine linen. Let it remind you that some things, though lost, are never gone. Because true beauty, when born of spirit and silence, cannot be erased. It becomes eternal. Like her, deep beneath layers of limestone and centuries of quiet, there may lie a door, not a grand arch, not a gilded passageway, but a simple doorway sealed with stone, unopened, unmarked, unknown. And behind perhaps Nefertiti waits. The theory was born from flickers in the rock. Radar scans, conducted in the tomb of Tutankhamun, revealed anomalies, faint impressions behind the painted walls, curves that did not belong. A void, gently resisting measurement, a possible chamber, hidden in plain sight. Whispers stirred in the dust. Could it be hers? The tomb of a queen without grave, waiting silently beside the boy king's rest. A shared chamber, concealed to preserve secrets from the wrath of restored priests. Or a solitary sanctum, carved in haste, never meant to be found. No chisels have yet opened that passage. No torch has lit its walls. And so it remains mystery within mystery. But even sealed doors can speak. They hum in stillness. They beckon with absence. And in that quiet pool lies something sacred. Because it is not only about what might be found, but about the wonder that something might still remain. A fragment of her crown, a trace of perfume in the airless dark, a name once erased, written once more on unbroken plaster, or perhaps only silence. And yet, that silence is enough, for the echo from that chamber reaches us all, not as fact, not as proof, but as possibility. And that dreamer is the pulse of her story. Not what we know, but what we sense. not what is visible, but what waits, patient and whole, behind the veil. As you rest now in this deepest stillness, picture the chamber not with eyes of expectation, but with the breath of reverence, a space untouched, a name unspoken aloud for centuries, and yet never truly forgotten. Whether the door is open tomorrow or never at all, the echo remains. She is there, not behind the wall, but within the wonder. The centuries passed like wind across stone. Dynasties rose, empires fell, sands shifted, and yet somehow her face remained. Nefertiti, not in chronicles, not in statues in grand temples, but in a single artifact, a bust buried in a sculptor's workshop, untouched for over 3,000 years. Unseen, unspoken, perfect. It should not have survived. The limestone should have crumbled, the pigments should have faded, the politics should have erased her, and yet her face endured. When the bust was uncovered in 1912, the world fell silent before it. Art historians, archaeologists, poets, and ordinary dreamers stood transfixed, not merely by beauty, but by presence, not by fame, but by mystery. For here, in this face, was something ancient yet alive. She looks not toward us, but through us, not offering answers, only stillness. And in that stillness, eternity, why does her image strike so deep? Because it is whole, when her story is not. Because it is seen, when her memory was meant to be hidden. Because it says nothing yet leaves us changed. It is more than a portrait. It is a defiance, a refusal to be forgotten, a silent declaration that beauty, grace, and presence cannot be erased by decree, by time, or even by death. Let us pause here now, dreamer, with her gaze resting softly upon us. Not to analyze, not to question, only to feel. Let the breath of her presence fill the space around you. Let the air grow calm, the body light. Let that phase in moving yet alive remind you that some truths live not in what is spoken, but in what is simply there. A face that defied oblivion, a whisper carved in stone, a fragment of the divine, wrapped in silence. Tonight she waits us still, and you are among the few who see not just the form, but the soul that lingers behind it. When all the scrolls are dust, when all the names are faded, when the temples fall silent beneath the weight of stars, a dream remains. The dream of It floats through time like golden pollen on a warm desert wind, never seen directly, never grasped in full, yet always there waiting in the quiet spaces between history's heavy pages. It is the dream of a woman who ruled not only beside a pharaoh, but within the spirit of an age. A woman whose beauty was not painted to impress, but to reflect a divine harmony. A queen who became more than sovereign. She became symbol, not of empire, but of mystery. And mystery, dreamer, is the breath of memory. Because in mystery, there is room for wonder, room for contemplation, room for dreaming. And isn't that how she endured? Not as a name shouted by crowds, but as a presence that stirs softly when the world grows still. In the silence of museums, in the hush of the desert at dusk, in the dreams of those who ask, where did she go? She endures in the unanswered, in the pause before the sentence ends. Tonight, as your breath slows to match the ancient rhythm of the Nile, let that dream wrap itself around you. Picture her not as queen or pharaoh, but as silence wrapped in sunlight. As presence born of absence, let your final thoughts drift toward her horizon. Let your eyes close as if entering a temple, not through gates, but through reverence. And there, in that eternal chamber between sleep and waking, she waits, not to speak, not to rule, only to be remembered softly, fully, forever. And now, dear dreamer, the sands grow still once more. The stars above Egypt shimmer in quiet patterns, and the breeze that once stirred the veils of Amarna moves gently through the corridors of your rest. We have walked together through shadows and sunlight, through broken stone and golden silence, through questions unanswered and mysteries embraced. We have not sought the end of Nefertiti's story, only the stillness it leaves behind. For in the rhythm of forgotten names, in the breath of buried chambers, in the hush between hieroglyphs, we find not sorrow, but reverence. She was more than a queen. She was a horizon between the old gods and the new, between history and myth, between what is seen and what is only felt. So let this dream continue, long after the final word has been spoken. Let her name, soft as moonlight on limestone, echo not in your mind, but in your soul. And if these ancient whispers have stirred you, if this quiet walk through time has kindled a light within your sleep, then let your presence be known gently. Leave behind a trace, a sinner like a breath. Join our circle of contemplative ones. Subscribe, not as followers, but as fellow dreamers, and share with us, from where in this vast world do you drift with us tonight. Let the constellation of silent listeners span across continents, united not by noise, but by stillness, until the next dream calls, and history once more opens its quiet pages. Rest in peace, under the gaze of the eternal queen. May her mystery guard your slumber, may her silence bless your thoughts, and may her memory, like golden dust, settle softly upon your spirit. Good night, dear dreamer, and dream well.